Good evening. I'm Jean Canary, and I'm your moderator for this evening. I'm the president for the Davis League of Women Voters, and tonight we're going to debate two of our local issues, Measures O and Measure P. But before I get started on that, Oliver Wendell Holmes had a few things to say about this kind of exchange of ideas, and he put it like this. If there is any principle of Constitution that more imperatively calls for attachment than any other, it is the principle of free thought. Not free thought for those who agree with us, but freedom for the thought that we hate. So in other words, we may not agree with the people that are up here, and some of them we probably will, but they put a lot of time and effort into this. So I want to make sure that you all give them a chance to listen and to absorb some of the information that they are giving to you. We have 4 debaters this evening, 1 pro and 1 con for each issue. Measure O will be Lucas Ferrix and Jose Granda, and Measure P will be Sue Greenwald and Matt Williams. I gave you the pro and then the con. I'm going to use the impartial analysis for each of these before they start debating, and only the first paragraph. You should have received in your mailbox by now from the Yolo County Elections Office, a combined sample ballot and voter information pamphlet, and the date of the election, which is Tuesday, June 3. And if you didn't, then you're probably not registered to vote and should see if there's still time for you to do that, or if there isn't, to get registered for the next time that you can vote. So we will start with Measure O, and the city attorney's impartial analysis of Measure O is what I'm going to use because it's much more brief than what is in the ballot of the argument or the whole of the statement of what it is, and it's very technical sounding, so it would probably put us all to sleep real quick. Measure O, if approved by a majority of the voters voting on the measure, will reauthorize and extend an existing city 1/2 cent, 0.5% transactions and use tax, i.e. a sales tax. That is slated to sunset on December 31st, 2016, and increase this tax by an additional 1/2 cent for a total of 1 cent or 1%. If approved, the 1 cent sales tax will sunset on December 31st, 2020, unless extended by the voters. Like the current 1/2 cent sales tax, the 1 cent sales tax would be a general tax, meaning that the revenue raised from that tax could go into the city's general fund and could be used for any legal governmental purpose. So, that said, we will begin with our pro, which will be 10 minutes, and then we will follow that with our con. The pro will be from Lucas Ferrix.
Great.
Lucas?
Thanks very much, Jean. Thanks very much to the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum this evening. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here to talk to you all about the city's pro side on Measure O. So I'm going to be speaking this evening in favor of Measure O. For folks that are not fully aware of what Measure O is, Measure O proposes to increase our community's sales tax to 8.5% until 2020. As Jean pointed out a moment ago in the city's impartial analysis, this represents a 0.5% increase now and will continue until 2020, an existing 0.5% tax that is due to expire in 2016. This modest increase in our sales tax rate will fund essential community needs that shouldn't be delayed further, including road, sidewalk, bike path, and streetlight repairs, as well as parks, landscaping, and street tree maintenance. Revenue from this sales tax increase will provide approximately $3.6 million per year toward our current $5.1 million structural budget deficit. With its passage, the City Council must still cut over $1 million to balance its 2014-2015 budget. Without this measure's approval, basic services including police, fire, parks, and recreation will also suffer severe cuts, up to 12.5%. Davis will become a less safe and less pleasant place to live. The City Council has recently restructured labor contracts for major cost savings, upwards of $7 million. We've restructured all of the city employee contracts, and that savings over the course of several years, the next couple of years, will result in savings of up to $7 million. Our total cuts thus far that we've made, the City Council, in the past several years are up to approximately $10 million. We are working towards long-term fiscal sustainability with employees paying significantly more towards their retirement. We have decreased, the City of Davis, this is really important, has decreased its workforce by 22%, or more than 103 full-time employees. At the height of city employment back in 2007, 2008, the city had 464 employees. Today, we have 361, and in the next proposed budget year, we will go down to 357. The longer Davis defers major road repairs, parks maintenance, and water conservation projects, the costlier they become. Davis is aggressively moving forward with economic development to generate additional tax revenue as a longer-term solution to the city's budget challenges. Many cities around us have implemented similar local tax measures. Sacramento's sales tax is 8.5% as well. San Francisco, Berkeley, and Oakland have higher rates. The economic recession has resulted in major declines in local tax revenue. Additionally, the state of California, the legislature, and then the governor signing, getting rid of the redevelopment agencies has also decreased the city's property taxes by almost half. Just a few years ago, the city was receiving about $20 million a year in property tax, and after the loss of the redevelopment agencies, the city's property tax went down to about $10 million per year. Also, the state's ongoing shift of responsibilities to local governments, including the loss of redevelopment dollars, concurrent with shifting property tax revenues away from cities, makes it crucial to increase local funding for core city functions through sales tax. Please help us protect the quality of life we all enjoy. Please vote yes on Measure O.
Okay, Jose, you have 10 minutes. Oh, that's not on, I don't think.
I appreciate the invitation of the League of Women Voters to debate this important issue here. To put into perspective why we're opposing this and what the subject is, I think it would be a good idea for everybody who is watching this or at home to bring up the campaign piece that everybody received with their bill. And here it says that the budget of the city is $248,203,282. So out of $243 million, this sales tax supposedly is asking the voters to for another $3.5 million. And the argument they're making is that this is to keep the city safe and police and all the stuff that all of us care. Davis I've been here for 35 years, and I don't remember needing a sales tax to keep the city safe or the streets being paved and all that stuff. But I believe that what is important here is to question whether the city council has made their case to say yes or no, and they haven't made their case. They haven't made their case because they have not explained to the voters why they need this money. They cannot come up with a laundry list of things of what the city is obligated to do, like parks and bike paths and all that stuff, and say this is the $3.5 million is what we have. But the budget of $248 million, we cannot do it with it. Things don't add up. I think Davis voters are intelligent people. They can see through it that this is treating the Davis voters as an ATM machine. Whenever there is a deficit or they run the budget in the red because they have not managed their money correctly, then they go to the ATM machine and they get more money. Those of us who were involved in opposing the parcel taxes and were able to bring the school board into compliance with the law, believe that that was the end of this battle. And the reason we are hearing this is because the city council has announced that there will be also a parcel tax in November. So we don't want to be caught by surprise, and the campaign starts with the aim at bringing down the parcel tax as well as the sale tax. So the city council wants two-step attack on the citizens of Davis to get their money. Now, let's talk about the language on the ballot, because this was the issue that we brought up in a court case, and we wanted to clarify this. We wanted to do the city a favor and do the citizens of Davis a favor by clarifying the language on the ballot. The language of the ballot says clearly here, it says that this is a half-cent sales tax and an additional half-cent for a total of 1 cent. Well, that's what it says. It means 1 penny. 1 penny is 1 cent. But the city seems to have some problem with arithmetic, because 1 penny is not the same as 1%. Now, the problem that the city has is they prevented this issue from the court making a decision by saying that technically our lawsuit needed the names of Mr. Fredericks. It was one of those. However, they themselves filed a lawsuit, and I have it right here, on which Mr. Lucas Fredericks is the plaintiff, and Ms. Freddie Oakley and the city clerk are the defendants, to correct the argument of Measure O, totally under the radar of the press and under the radar of the public, because they had put in their argument a web page of the yesono.net, which was a Korean dating service. Nobody knows this in the city. However, this is part of Measure O. And here, I'm glad Mr. Fredericks is here, because he went to court to fix it, and I agree with him. But the same thing that we try to do to fix it, instead of saying half-cent tax, call it what it is, 0.5%. Instead of calling 1%, 1 penny, call it 1%. We couldn't do that. But Mr. Fredericks was able to get that with the collaboration of Attorney Alan Fernandez, who represented him in that case. So I think as the press has publicized our lawsuit, also this other lawsuit should be publicized. Mr. Fredericks owns an explanation to the voters in Davis why this lawsuit was not made public. And so I think that, in summary, we're opposing the measure because there's no need for this. We are not an ATM machine, the voters of Davis. We are preparing to also campaign against the parcel tax, which would be the 5th parcel tax in 3 years, between the city council and the school board. Cannot have the citizens of Davis increasing their mortgage payments just because they cannot manage their money. And therefore, I urge the citizens of Davis to intelligently analyze the language, see that the language is false and misleading, and vote no on this. But the battle is not over. If the measure passes, there will be another court case, because we will take it to court to have it clarify whether, in fact, what it says on the ballot is what it means. And I believe that the city would lose that case, because the California Supreme Court, in the case Rutledge versus Crawford, has said that what the letter on the ballot is the contract between the voter and their government. And therefore, if it says 0.5 cent, the next time you buy something, you don't pay 0.5%, pay 0.5 cent or pay 1 cent. And if the city forces you to pay 1%, hopefully the court will make sure that we get this issue clarified. Please vote no on Measure O.
We'll now have our rebuttals, and those will be 5 minutes, and you'll have a 30-second warning. And we'll begin with you, Lucas.
Thanks very much. So a couple of things. First of all, I would like folks to take a look at this document here in front of me, which is an informational piece that was included in the city's recent utilities bill. It talks about Measure O in a very sort of nonpartisan way, and it certainly was was something that I think everybody should take a good look at, because it lays out the background, certainly on Measure O, and how we got to this place. And it does talk about the city's budget, and I think that everybody would certainly benefit from seeing it and reading it. There are copies in the back of the room. I'm not sure if anyone maybe might care to hand those out or make sure people have them, but if you definitely would like to take a copy with you, if you hadn't had a chance to yet read it, it's very good and informational. Lots of good information there. So I'd like to also just start by saying, if folks would just close your eyes for a moment. Think of your home. Think of right where you live on your home, and then sort of think about your street, and just on your daily trek to and from the shop, the grocery store, or on your way to the farmer's market on a Saturday morning, whether you're on your bicycle or in your car or walking. What are some of the things that you notice, even right by your home? Or if you're out for a walk in the evenings, do you notice that there are street lights that are out all around town? Do you notice that there are the streets themselves are in really bad condition? Big potholes, broken sidewalks. All of those are the types of things that are things that will be covered with the passage of Measure O. And one of the things that we really pride ourselves on here in Davis is our famed quality of life. And if Measure O fails, Davis's quality of life will be severely compromised. The opponents to this 0.5% renewal and 0.5% sales tax increase are using scare tactics. Measure O will not put Davis businesses at a competitive disadvantage, since most regional cities have nearly equal or greater local sales taxes. As explained in the argument in favor of Measure O, the revenue resulting from this small tax increase will provide approximately $3.6 million per year in additional revenue to prevent deep cuts in city services and maintain modest levels of funding for road, sidewalk, and bike path repairs. Without this measure's approval, basic city services including police, fire, parks, and recreation will absolutely suffer significant costs up to 12.5%. As it stands right now, the $3.6 million that we are expecting to raise from Measure O would actually not cover the city's current structural deficit. The City Council will be, in its upcoming deliberations in the next month or so, making additional cuts, absolutely additional cuts, to balance the city's budget of at least $1 million more in cuts. And those cuts have been outlined, and we are available on the city's website, and we'd be glad to share that link with you. As I mentioned previously, the City Council has been absolutely doing the right thing. We've recently restructured our labor contracts for major cost savings and long-term fiscal sustainability, with employees paying significantly more towards their retirement. We've decreased our workforce by 22%, and services have definitely suffered, or 103 full-time employees in recent years. Without the revenue that Measure O renewal and slight increase in sales tax revenue provides, the fiscal outlook for the city will be extremely uncertain, and major service cuts will start to seriously degrade our quality of life. All the things that I mentioned earlier, including burnt-out streetlights, the potholes, the broken sidewalks, those things will not be able to be fixed. Davis is known regionally and throughout the country as an unusually fine place to live, work, and study. Renewing the modest 0.5-cent sales tax, coupled with a 0.5-cent increase until 2020, is a small price to pay to retain our quality of life. We certainly would hope you would consider voting yes on Measure O.
Thank you, Lucas. Jose, your 5-minute rebuttal.
Well, Mr. Frederick seems to emphasize the scare tactics, and that's exactly what you heard from him. The potholes will not be fixed, the sky is going to fall, and, we're not going to do this. What does it make you think that with $3.5 million that, in addition, that they want, that they are going to fix this when they have a budget of $248 million? If they have not been able to do it with $248 million, what does it make you think that they're going to make it with 3.5? I think it's very clear that these are the scare tactics. I have lived in Davis for 35 years and haven't seen this kind of pressure on the voters to say, the city is going to change if you don't do this. But that's precisely why you should vote no, because you want to send a message for them to be able to manage the money wisely, manage the money, $248 million wisely. The last time that this passed in 2004, they, instead of fixing the potholes and whatever Mr. Fredericks is saying they're going to do, they gave a 36% raise to a group of city employees in over a 3-year period. I think that's not fair to the voters, and the record speaks for themselves. They have not done it. They don't deserve it. They have not explained why they need it. And finally, I'd like to address the fact that Mr. Fredericks did not address the lawsuit. I believe the city council needs to explain to the voters why they went to court and why they actually, under the radar of the press and of the voters, they did not publicize that lawsuit in which he was the plaintiff. And so I think that ultimately the voters of Davis will see the light that they're being fed something that appears to be very low. You know, who cares about half a cent? Who cares about 1 penny? Well, in fact, this is false. When it passes, they're going to charge you 0.5% or 1%. But let's say that the language, they, instead of being deceptive like that, is clear. Even if it would be 1% or 0.5%, the fact that the sales tax would go to 8.5% in Davis would be devastating to Davis businesses. And I believe, as in my contacts with the businesses in Davis, most of the businesses are opposed, but they're also afraid of the politics in town. I think that it is imperative that the businesses stand up and that they also encourage everybody to vote no. I have an issue with the Chamber of Commerce PAC for not having the courage to come and defend what is good for businesses. Increasing taxes is never good for businesses, especially most businesses. In my contacts with the businesses in town, they have said, my sales would go down if this taxes are more expensive. If you buy a car in Davis, that's when you really will notice, because saving $300-400 would make you go buy someplace else. So saving the economy in Davis and sending a message to the city council to manage their money wisely, please vote no.
Thank you very much. We now will start with Measure P, and we have a pro message from Sue Greenwald and the con message from Matt Williams, and they each have 10 minutes apiece. So, Sue, you get to take it away. Well, we have a timer right up front here, and he's got, yeah. So I can watch and I'll point to you if you need it. But the 10 minutes is pretty strict, Okay. So you ready?
Yes.
Get started now.
My name is Sue Greenwald. I was probably the council member that was on the council the longest during the period of the planning process, 12-year planning process of the water project. I'm quite familiar with the project, its history. I was mayor during part of that period. Mark Siegler, who's a professor of economics at Sac State, did the fiscal analysis of the rates for us, and without that, it would have been very difficult because it's so complicated. What we found is that homeowners and tenants of single-family homes will still be paying almost 40% more for each gallon of water than other residential users under the new water rate structure, and much more than commercial as well. Not only is this unfair, it's going to ultimately result in higher costs for most ratepayers, and it will lead to some adverse unintended consequences, which I'll enumerate. We all agree that if you use twice as much water, you should pay twice as much, but not almost 3 times as much or more. Yet that is what single-family homes will be paying under the new water rate structure. Voting yes on Measure P will repeal this rate structure and send a very strong message to Council to implement a rate structure that is fair to all. And I think we've been pretty clear about what most people consider fair. Residents of single-family homes will pay 40% more per gallon than other residential users, and far more than commercial users for two reasons. One is the reliance on the summer peak month use to determine 2/3 of the bill for the year. And the other is using the meter size and the way they've done it to determine a portion of this bill. Fair rates become increasingly important as our water rates escalate astronomically. The cost of the new surface water and wastewater treatment plants will result in our municipal utility bills being among the highest statewide. I know because I've called the highest state regions and talked to their long-range forecasters. Now, the council has been, and Mayor Joe Cravoza in his DCN speech have been claiming that it's fair to charge the median homeowner 40% more for each gallon of water, because they say that the cost of the surface water project is dictated by what they call peak use, which they define as summer use. Similarly, I mean, sometimes it's defined as time of day use, so that's not a given. Time of day, Matt Williams himself said, was more responsible for peak water demand than time of year. He said that, I have it on tape. So similarly, they argue that it is fair to charge one household less per gallon than its neighbor year-round if that household has a vacation home and can afford extended summer vacations. Then the neighbor, they could use just as much water year-round, and the neighbor that can afford a summer home and a long vacation will pay less because of the 12-month summer, because of the peak summer structure. First, the city claimed, this is false, the peak use argument is completely false to begin with. The city claimed, that's because the city claimed that we need, this peak use pays for the fixed costs, which are mostly the water project. That's like 80% of our bill. The city claimed that we needed the surface water project for reasons that have nothing at all to do with peak use, such as securing river water rights, improving water quality, complying with new salinity and selenium standards. I mean, we would use this whether there was peak use, people cut back on the irrigation or not. And in fact, the city consultants that we hired proved we could have achieved met all the necessary state and federal goals, including peak capacity, without the project. I can document that for you. We have a report that says so. So there's just and I think one of the more important things is the rationale that I keep hearing when I go back and listen to the tapes is that the size of the treatment plant is determined by peak use. Well, we've already heard from staff that decreasing the size of the treatment plant further won't have any noticeable impact on our water bills. So there really is no justification for shifting the costs of this massive project disproportionately to any category of users. In this case, it happens to be single families. Tend to lobby less effectively, I think. Conservation. Another reason given for the peak use is that it'll increase water conservation. Well, there's, given the extraordinary costs that we'll soon be paying for water conservation, for this water, for our water bills, we're going to be conserving every drop we can. It's going to be incredibly expensive, even if we distribute it fairly. And no one wants to pay twice as much or 3 times as much as they need to, even at a straight per gallon rate. I mean, this conservation idea works when rates are low. It's unnecessary when rates become astronomically high. We have to shift our paradigms a little, given the reality. The City Council has made the incorrect claim that 2/3 of people will be paying less under this new system. I mean, as if that mattered. I mean, you could also say that we'll charge all widows and orphans their whole life savings, and then more people will pay less. Is that a standard of fairness? Of course not. But it's not true. It relies on the false claim that the assumption that the big summer irrigators like the city, the school district, and some large lot neighborhoods will pay massively more, but they're opting out. Matt argues that that's been taken into account already, and I will prove in my rebuttal that it absolutely is not at all, okay? Opting out. The council knows how when they opt out and digging their own wells, they're going to shift the costs back to the remaining ratepayers. So most people will be paying more after this occurs. The city's calculations also assume substantial future growth and assume that future subdivisions will use the same amount of summer water as existing homes. That's already built into our rates. But because of this new rate structure, new subdivisions are likely to opt out and dig their own wells. So by using the summer-based rate system, the city is virtually forcing out our largest ratepayers, our best customers, which include some of the large lot neighborhoods like the one Matt lives in, and the city itself, and new future subdivisions to dig expensive new wells for irrigation. This is just plain old bad business model. It's going to leave existing residential users and existing businesses to subsidize the indoor water use of some of the affluent neighborhoods who opt out. And yes, existing ratepayers will probably end up subsidizing the indoor water use of new subdivisions, unless we go to a 12-month system or some other form of not penalizing summer users. So some of the unintended consequences are that the council's claimed it's environmentally preferable for large irrigators to opt out and kick the cost back to the remaining taxpayers, because the new mantra is potable water should not be used for irrigation. But, you know, shallow wells are salty wells, so irrigating with these wells causes more saline runoff, polluting our streams and rivers. According to our own, and that goes straight into the storm sewer, you can't deny that. According to our city hired consultants, shallow wells are the ones that cause subsidence, not the deep wells we've been using. That was another reason given for the water project, yet salinity, pollution, and subsidence risk were the two of the main reasons given for council for undertaking the extraordinarily expensive surface water project in the first place. So economically and environmentally, it is crucial not to price our major irrigators out of the market. The project cost reductions have been exaggerated, so don't think that the costs are going to be substantially lower. Don't count on it. I'll explain that in my rebuttal. The council's last-minute 8% rate reduction, well, it's a drop in the bucket. It doesn't change the underlying structural unfairness to certain user group, in this case, single families. And it's just an optimistic guess. If we don't get the state loans, which low-interest state loans, et cetera, which it looks like we won't, we'll just have to raise the rates later. And finally, there's going to be no dire consequences from the passage of Measure P, as claimed by council and staff. These are the usual scare tactics, as Lucas said. He knows what scare tactics are, and I'll explain in my rebuttal why that is. But we could list all the glaring inadequacies of the WAC process, but it's irrelevant. The council appointed specific members of the WAC, and we elected the council and the council alone. It is their responsibility, it's incumbent upon our city council, they're the ones that are accountable and elected, to come up with rates that don't unfairly penalize any user group and have long-term adverse consequences for the city in terms of having our best users leave our system. I will just close with a statement by Bill Strang, who's a local apartment owner and big developer. And I am his arch council nemesis, and we both agree on this. He said, quote, "I think it should be unanimous that we don't want a rate structure that will cause the biggest users to go dig their own wells. That way, the biggest users would pay no part of this gigantic fixed cost, and we are incurring hundreds of millions of dollars because the judge says we are polluting the stream with too much salt. And so we go tell our biggest users to dig shallow wells and pollute the water and don't pay any part of the $100 million that we're going to pay for the surface water. That makes no sense for me." So when you have Sue Greenwald and Bill Strang both agreeing that the biggest priority is not to drive. Okay, you get it.
All right. Thank you. You're welcome. Matt Williams for the con. 10 minutes, Matt.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters, and thank you for all you citizens who are out here. I spent close to a year and a half sitting at this table in the front in an open and exhaustive televised process in which many of you who are sitting out in the audience attended. Pam Nyberg attended virtually all the Water Advisory Committee meetings. It's worth looking at the fact that Measure P is just the latest chapter in that open and exhaustive process about the way we in Davis deliver and pay for water. There's a big difference, though, between now and December 2011. There are similarities. What Measure P is asking the city of Davis, its voters and its ratepayers to do, is to pause once again and to do over what we have done before. In 2011, we had approved rates through a Prop 218 process. The council had acted on the votes and notices, responses and protests of the people and had passed an ordinance. And in the really good democratic process that we have, the people said to the council, we need to look at this more. The council, very wisely, rescinded the ordinance, created the Water Advisory Committee, and turned to the north, to our neighbors in Woodland, and said, we are pausing. We have not a legal business commitment to one another at this point. We need to honor our voters. We need to honor the voice of our ratepayers. So, for a year, little over a year, things were looked at exhaustively. There were 15 of us. It was not a process that was perfect. It was not a process that created unanimity. There were differences of opinion. Part of it is that some of the data that's available is speculative. The water that is down in the deep aquifer is tens of thousands of years old. The only way we could know how that water regenerates itself is to put dye markers in, and we don't even know where that water originated from. Some say it's up in Clear Lake. The reality is the science can only speculate. But based on all of the input from all of the experts from UC Davis, from the city of Seattle, who is using the DBO process, from various consultants along the way, from financial advisors, the Water Advisory Committee, and I emphasize that word, advisory, made a recommendation to the council. Sue has said that the responsibility of the decision is the council's alone. The reality is that the council members made a decision. They did not take whole cloth the advice of the Water Advisory Committee. They made a decision that was in the best interests of us, the citizens, and us, the ratepayers. Based on that, we got two different times that we could, in a democratic process, voice our opinions. There was Measure I that had to do with the project itself, and when we voted on March 5th, in Measure I, we all knew what the rates were. They had been published in a Prop 218. There was a notice that went to every voter, so they knew what the rates were. And by a plurality of 54 to 46, the citizens of Davis approved going for enabling the council members to go forward with the project. About 2 weeks later, the results of the Prop 218 process on the rates came in, and there were 11%. It was 89% saying that the rates were good and 11% saying the rates were problematic, concerning, whatever one wanted to have as the reasons for protesting. But 89 to 11 is a landslide no matter how you work it. There are flaws with the Prop 218 process, but most of us will say that a vote that goes 89 to 11 is a pretty clear message. As a result, the council turned to our neighbors to the north and said, the pause is over. We are now ready to make a legal business commitment to you. Sue has said scare tactics associated with the downside risk of passing Measure P. The reality is, based on the proper democratic information, our council made a business commitment not only to the citizens of Woodland, but also to the contractor that won the bid to build the plant. There are fiscal consequences in those. I have heard numbers. I don't pretend to understand the contract. I've heard numbers as low as $25 million. I've heard numbers as high as $60 million are what the penalty costs in aggregate from the different components are. If we vote no on P, we're going to have some portion of that. As I said, I'm not a lawyer. I don't pretend to know. The concern that I have is that the people who are saying that we should vote yes on Measure P are saying to you, the voters, that they're not taking that $25 million seriously. If they took that $25 million seriously that is going to come out of our pocket, they would give you correct numbers to be able to make a decision. They say homeowners and tenants of single-family homes soon will be paying 40% more for each gallon of water than other residential users under the new water rates adopted by the City Council. I have in this wonderful little PC, and those of you who know me, it's always under my arm. I have all 16,433 accounts with every single consumption period for the 3 years of 2011, 2010, 2009. I have done the calculation. It is no more, at the median of the single-family home, it is no more than 2% difference. So my question to Sue, that she can address in her rebuttal, or you all can ask in the audience questions, is, how did you come up with 40%? It's a very simple thing. If you look at what the dollars per CCF are for a 132 CCF per year, 11 CCF per month account, single family, commercial, multifamily, the difference is 2%. So either they didn't do their homework and they gave us incorrect numbers, or they're playing a game, because deep down, underneath all of this, it really isn't about the rates. This is about killing the project. And the rates are just the excuse. For 25 million or more of risk, the voters, the ratepayers, should say no to Measure P, say yes to fiscal responsibility, and say yes to the future of Davis. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. We'll now begin our rebuttals. Sue?
Oh, yeah. Where did my little timer go? I desperately need the
5
timer.
minutes.
Yeah, no, I had the
Got it?
timer that tells me. Could you give me like a 2-minute and a 1-minute sign? Do you have those so I can get a sense of how I'm doing? Okay. Thank you. Matt, I don't think that an ad hominem argument is appropriate. This has absolutely nothing to do with killing the project, because it won't kill the project. It can't kill the project. If Measure P passes, this is the ultimate scare tactic. If Measure P passes, all that will happen is that we'll be collecting for 2 or 3 months the old rates. There'll be perhaps a small shortfall that can be covered by the reserve, or lines of credit at the bank, a small bridge loan. We're talking about a project that's going to be, borrowing umpteen million loans over many years. This passing Measure P is not going to hurt the project at all. So that's really an unfair argument. Matt claimed that there'd be only a 2% difference or something. I don't know. Matt's creative bookkeeping I've never understood, but Professor Ziegler went over these numbers, and in fact, the median homeowner, and he'll show you the charts, he's got it documented, will be paying 40% more. The reason is a combination of the summer-based rate and the meter charge. Currently, the meter charge component is more responsible, but it does, the issue is the opting out, which hasn't been accounted for at all in the rates. And Matt claims they have, and he's dead wrong. So yes, it's 40% more. It's a lot. Matt said everybody understood these rates. To tell you just how untrue that is, this afternoon, for a short period, there was a letter to the editor posted online at the Enterprise by one of our leading water experts, whose name is always invoked on someone who supports the project, and he was writing in favor for no on Measure P, and he said his rates were going to be fair because by 2018, he'd only be paying about $50-some a month, and that's totally fair. And actually, he totally miscalculated the rates because he didn't understand the rate structure. Matt, you're wrong. Nobody understands the rate structure. It turns out when Mark went over it, he would be paying actually, he's going to be paying $648 more a year than his rate he thought he was going to be paying, okay? It was like, going to be more like 100 or something a month than the, and he was this leading water rate specialist who's always been quoted as promoting the project, had no clue as to how to calculate the rates. I posted a comment under it, and it was retracted. So we have the letter. So the process is irrelevant. It's the results that count. I think that there's been a ton of misinformation. The most important is the damages. They rely on two assumptions: that the project will fall through, which it won't, and that we will lose low-interest loans. In fact, we've probably already lost our low-interest state loans because the council unwisely chose to go with privatized operations. We might even lose our tax-exempt status, which would be a total disaster. And we have to pray that doesn't happen. The project cost decreases have been exaggerated. Their unfunded liabilities weren't accounted for. They didn't account for the $35 million they didn't bother posting at $35 million in internal improvements that are necessary. Huge difference. Okay, so in terms of opting out, the opting out was not taken into account in the rate structure. What they did, and this is in the rate study, they just applied the standard elasticity index, which means that assuming no opting out, there'll be this much conservation because prices go up, and there was more conservation for the city because irrigators are going up more. That's why they're all leaving. So in fact, the city went the city went down 40% because of just standard conservation. Opting out will have it go down much further. There's a huge amount, like basically the new subdivisions, the village homes is massive. Even Matt's neighborhood in Willowbank's only like almost 5%. City's 15% of summer use. You can see what that's going to do to homeowner rates and to the rates for the entire city. And that's why we have to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Now we have 5 minutes from Matt.
2 or 3, at least, times in Sue's rebuttal, she used the word probably. Let's bring some reality to the word probably. I live in El Macero. She has said El Macero probably will opt out. Bill Dendy, who was the executive director of the State Water Resources Control Board, nobody in the state knows more about water than Bill does, has looked at what it would cost to put in an irrigation-only water system for El Macero. Now, El Macero already owns its well. If you've ever driven along Mace Boulevard, there is a big well right on the east side of Mace, and El Macero actually owns that well. So we won't have any cost for drilling a new well. Bill has gotten estimates that under the auspices of the county services area for El Macero, so these numbers are part of the public record, that the cost of putting in just the purple piping to get the water to the houses in El Macero is between $8 and $12 million. The debt service on a 20-year borrowing at 5% on $12 million is $963,000 a year. Right now, the supply charge for 2015 is $550,000. This is a question to all of you. Would you be willing to have water that is worse for your plants for $963,000 a year, or better water that is better for your plants for $550,000 a year. It's a pretty simple decision that the El Macero residents are facing. They hope there are people who want to think that their bill can go down, but the realities of the capital costs of putting the piping in the ground are huge. Village Homes doesn't have to face that issue because they have a common area. They're not talking about irrigating the backyards of every house. They're doing the common area. The amount of water in the total that Village Homes common area is, pardon the pun, a drop in the bucket. The reality is Sue is wrong. We did not apply a universal elasticity factor. We took the irrigation-only customers and the Tier 3 residential use, and we assumed that 40% of their consumption would go away over the period of time. Now, that's a lot of customers, and some of whom aren't going to conserve less than 10%. Some of whom may go away, 100% may go away. But you end up in a situation where 40% is built into the rates that's assumed. The reality is that because 2011 was a dry year, it's really closer to 50% based on what we have used in 2012 and 2013. Those are built in. The people who were in Tier 2 and in multifamily assumed 20% consumption, and the people who were already conserving and using very little water in Tier 1 and the commercial establishments that don't do much irrigation were expected to do no more than 5%. In total, it was a 22% blended conservation. That's built into the rates. So unless we end up conserving down to 122 gallons per person per day, we will be fine. Right now, we are using 165 gallons per person per day. So imagine that you're using 165 gallons in your personal life. Do you think you could get down to 122? Most of us cannot. Let's talk about the environmental aspect. Right now, we have 26 wells in the system, 20 of which are deep aquifer, 26 of which are deep aquifer, 20 are intermediate aquifer. All of those 20 are scheduled to go out of service because they do not comply with the wastewater discharge. If we have 1 or 2 irrigation wells, we will still be going from 20 down to 1 or 2 or maybe 3. The impact on the environment of going from 20 intermediate wells to 3 intermediate wells is self-explanatory.
Thank you, Matt. We're going to take a very brief break here and collect your written questions. Make sure that your questions address both sides. If it doesn't allow a yes and a no, I won't be able to use it. So write your questions so it can be answered by the pro and the con person, okay? And we have 3x5 cards, and there are a few extra small pencils sort of circulating around. Hopefully everyone will be able to get a hold of a writing instrument if they need it. They can borrow my pen. I guess that's it, and we'll break for 10 minutes. We'll start in again at 10 minutes after 8, or 5 minutes after 8, sorry. Thank you. We're back with the audience's questions, and I've got quite a stack of Measure P and a small stack of Measure O. I think, I know that Lucas said that 2 minutes was better than 1 minute, but I'd like to get through all of these. I think sometimes right off the bat that we say what we really mean. and quickly. I don't really see a need to go longer than that. So Glenn's going to give you a 30-second and then a stop, so you'll know halfway through. And the other part of it is we're going to address it with a pro and a con for each of these, okay? So I'll start with the Measure O, and then we'll try to get through most of the Measure P, and I'm going to be watching the clock because I know what time we need to be finished by. So we'll begin with this question, which, isn't it true that there is no incentive to buy a car outside of Davis because those sales and subject to the Measure O, because those sales are subject to the Measure O sales tax? So in other words, I'm not sure what this person means about no incentive to buy a car outside of Davis because those sales are subject to the Measure O sales tax, but it probably, I'm going to let you go for it.
Sure. Well, to answer that question quickly is just that whenever you buy a car, you pay the sales tax rate in the community where you live, not where you buy the car. So if you buy a car in Sacramento, which many people do, they live in Davis, they pay 8.5% sales tax. So you actually, but you would then also pay the sales tax based on the community where you live. So we sell a lot of cars, and that's a state law. And we sell a lot of cars here in Davis, certainly, but we sell a lot of cars to folks who are from outside of the community, and they actually pay the sales tax in the community in which they actually live. So that would be my response to a question.
Thank you, Lucas. Jose?
Well, my understanding of the question is what incentive there is to buy a car here. And I would say that if the tax rates are higher in other cities, of course it's an incentive to buy a car here. But if you buy a $30,000 car and you can save $300 or $400, you're going to buy it someplace else if Measure O passes. So therefore, that's why I'm saying to protect our businesses, you should vote no.
Okay, the second question on Measure O quotes Ruth Asmunson, who was our former mayor of the city of Davis, when asked how to make up the budget shortfall, a wild horse on schools and city budgets, stated that we, meaning the citizens of Davis, would simply raise a bond/tax measure. Your reply. And we'll begin with you, Lucas.
Sure. I've never heard Ruth Asmunson say that, so I'm not sure sort of the exact response that is being looked for, but I would just say to you all that, we are appreciative as this current city council every day that you have elected us to the city council, particularly to make tough decisions on behalf of Davis's citizens. There are some things that we agree on, as five votes, all five of us. Some things we disagree on, but we are unanimously in support of Measure O, the need for this modest sales tax measure. There's no question that our largest challenge has been the city's budget situation, and we've been making tough and essential decisions, including cutting nearly $11 million over the past several years. We are respectfully asking the voters and citizens of Davis to consider approving a modest increase in our city's sales tax in order to provide us the ability to address vital infrastructure issues like fixing potholes, burnt-out streetlights, and water conservation projects, while we continue to focus on increased revenue through additional economic development. Please vote yes on Measure O.
Thank you, Lucas. Jose?
I know Ruth very well. Have known her for years. She's a good friend. I have never heard her say that or perceived that she would just raise the taxes here. I think that she is not the issue in this debate, I think, or who says that is not relevant. The fact is that if you raise this tax, there will be consequences, bad consequences for the businesses in Davis. I think that's something that is very obvious. I don't believe that the so-called modest increase is going to cause an impact of a budget that is $248 million, and $3 million is going to drive what the city does. As I have expressed, I have lived here 35 years, have never seen the need for this tax And I believe that the voters of Davis would see clear through this. This is not needed and vote no.
Thank you, Jose. Okay, the last Measure O question is, what assurance is there that Measure O funds will be used for potholes, roads, and other facility maintenance? And we'll start off with you, Lucas.
Sure, absolutely. This is a general tax, which means it takes a 50% plus one majority to approve the tax. If it was a specific tax for a specific purpose, it would have to be a 2/3 vote. So a general purpose tax goes into the city's general fund, and it can be used for many purposes. As I said earlier, and this is a different city council than in years past, the five of us are in complete agreement. We have been working on fiscal responsibility for the past several years, making necessary cuts and cutting over 103 positions here at the city. We, the city council, are asking you to trust the five of us to do the right thing and to put that money towards the items that we have described in the ballot measure, which include pothole maintenance, water conservation projects, sidewalk repair, and other essential items. There's no question, again, like I said earlier, and you were here and heard, when you're around the city and you look around, there are major infrastructure items that need to be addressed. Just take a good look around and know that we will absolutely be putting that money to good use in fixing our infrastructure.
Thank you, Lucas. Jose?
I think precisely because of what you said, the voters should not trust you, because $248 million, you have not been able to fix the potholes or the bike paths, and now with 3.5, you're going to do it. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. And that's the city of, we have a situation where the city council cannot be trusted, the school board cannot be trusted, and we really need a new change in the politics in town of fiscal responsibility to the taxpayers, and fiscal responsibility to do what the city needs to do instead of treating the Davis voters as a bank where they can just go and get the money. I believe that the city and the citizens of Davis are intelligent people. This is the second most highly educated city in the United States, and they will see that this is not needed. Vote no.
Thank you, Jose. Now we'll attack this stack of Measure P questions. And this one is kind of interesting, and it really wasn't addressed by either of our speakers. How can you address the issue with CBFR, meaning the new rate, where the people living at a property change year to year, and the entire year, next year's rates are based on the previous year's use, as is in the case with CBFR? So we'll start off with you, Sue.
Yeah, I think that is a huge problem. Personally, I'd like to see a flat a per gallon cost. You pay twice as much, you use twice as much, and a big enough reserve to cover the fluctuations in usage. I think there's a real problem with in a town where so many units turn over, and I think a quarter of our single-family units are tenants. It is going to be very difficult to. Why would a tenant conserve when it's the next year's person that's going to pay for it? And that's 25% of our houses. Last time I looked. So yeah, it's huge, and we didn't have time to bring up everything. Hardly had time to bring up anything relevant, but with the time constraint. But I'm glad the questioner brought it up because it's very important. Thank you.
Matt?
Do me a favor, raise your hand if you pay income taxes every year. You talk to your accountant in April or March if you're aggressive, or February, and you say, I need to do I need to figure out what my estimated taxes need to be for next year so that when I get to next April, I've paid in enough so that I don't get a penalty. You can do exactly the same thing in this situation. you can say that new resident, whether it's a student, group of students, or whether it's a new homeowner, can look at the use from the house. 2/3 of the use ends up being external, and do a subscription like your estimated taxes, and then have a true up in November based on if you used more than what you said you were going to use, you pay, or you get a refund if you used less.
Thank you, Matt. This one, a person says, could you state again your reasons for saying Measure P will or will not only affect rates and will not jeopardize the whole surface water project, and might or might not cause a penalty that they would need to pay to Woodland?
Could you repeat that?
Okay, it's in saying what they want to know is, will Measure P actually cause an effect in rates? Will it jeopardize the whole surface water project itself? And consequently, will Davis have to pay a penalty to Woodland, or may not have to pay a penalty to Woodland? So I'll start with you, Sue.
Okay, that's truly preposterous. I think I already addressed that. Measure, if it passes, our rates will roll back to basically last year's rates, and there'll be a little bit less collected. We have a substantial reserve. It'll, almost certainly cover it. And if it doesn't, we have lines of credit at banks, and we have bridge loans. We've got the best credit rating in town. This is like absolutely silly for a 2 or 3 month delay. Delay in a modest increase, because the big increases haven't rolled in yet.
Matt?
So that, it's
Oh,
just silly.
sorry.
Yeah.
Let me address first Sue's statement that we have a large reserve. We have less than 6 months of operating cost reserve, substantially small reserve. So we don't have any room for error. The second thing is that with the existing rate structure that has been approved, you have a revenue stream that starts at $13 million and each year goes along till we get to the point where it's $29 million, $26 million at the end of 2018. That revenue stream, the lending institutions rely on as sure money. They are able to give us very low interest rates because they are issuing what is referred to as revenue bonds. They know that the money is committed to it. If P passes, the revenue stream is gone, and the revenue stream doesn't get larger over the years. We go back to the same exact rate structure, and it will be only the $11 million each year, so the interest rates will be higher.
Thank you, Matt. This one, I'm going to give you 2 minutes apiece on, because I'm going to combine two things. It has to do with the tiered rate structure, such as the one used by Woodland. They want to know why not use a tiered rate structure. And the other person's question, which really speaks to the same thing, could not the goal of conservation be achieved more fairly and simply with cheap base rates and more expensive per gallon rates for tiers above the base? So they're both asking the same question, really. It's about tiers and with a lower base rate, and then something to affect that with a higher base, with the next tier up, or even more tiers. So we'll start off with you, Sue.
First I just want to go back to Matt's last question. We have entire 6 months of complete operating expenses in reserve, and so we'll be collecting like maybe, 10% or 15% less for 2 months? Do the math. There's no problem at all covering it. Matt made the case for me. It really depends. You've got to actually, what councils didn't do and should do is look at a rate structure, then look at the cross class distribution to make sure that commercial isn't paying too much, more per gallon for their share. Apartments aren't paying too much, homeowners aren't paying too much. Look at the cross-class distributions after you run it. That was what wasn't done. That's why we got backed into this problem that I think no one was really aware of. And then think about what kind of individual variation you want. I mean, I think our rates are going to be so high that we'll be just fine with a per gallon rate. I think we'll have tons of conservation and very high expenses. But I think that, yeah, you know, there's many ways you could make a much fairer rate. And I think the key to keep in mind is after you decide on a rate, you know, really run the numbers, have a professional run the numbers and look at it, you know, not citizen volunteers, and have it, and actually ask citizen volunteers not to be involved, and have them look at, you know, and ask, is each class of user contributing, you know, the same amount per gallon as a class? Then decide what you want to do in terms of usage. There is a problem with keeping our trees green. It is true that trees need, you know, irrigation. We do have a lot of other things to think about. And please, you can price people out into opting out, including El Macero.
Thank you, Matt. You get a whole 2 minutes.
Where's Bob Dunning when you need him? Here's the problem that you have with tiers. Now, the Water Advisory Committee, we voted and recommended tiers. So the council made a decision that for simplicity purposes and for a number of other reasons to go with a uniform block rate structure. The problem with tiers is that for a large family like Bob has, who's the fourth child will be paying more per gallon than the first child. Water budgets give people allocations per person, which takes away that problem, but we're not going to water budgets. So tiers create a disproportionality problem. This graphic that I'm holding up now says very clearly, and anyone who wants to see it can see it afterward, every user pays the exact same dollar per gallon, whether it is the variable costs, which are for electricity to pump the water, chemicals to treat the water, and rebates for conservation. We're all paying, just pulling up to the pump, and we're paying the exact same rate per gallon, no matter who you are. And for the infrastructure costs, we're all paying the exact same interest rate for the infrastructure that is needed in order to make it so that at 6 o'clock in the morning, when we are taking a shower in the hottest day in the summer, we have water coming out of our shower, not just going to our irrigation system. So the problem with tiers is that until we can get a way to make sure that people's fundamental right to be treated equally under the law and have the same amount of water available, we can't go to tiers as effectively. Water budgets would solve that.
Thank you, Matt. The next question has to do with somebody who apparently does have somewhere to escape to during the summer months. They ask, if I'm away for 1 or more months, what will I pay for not using water? They also want to know something interesting, and I'm interested in this too. What's the latest on gray water? And I think we'll just do 1 minute on this for each of them. So, Sue?
Yeah. I have no idea what Matt's previous chart was. We're not paying the same amount per gallon. The median homeowner is paying 40% more per gallon, so I just don't know where that comes from. What was that again?
We're talking about 1 or more months. They're going to be away.
One of the
water.
problems we have is that because you'll pay a fixed fee for when you're gone, but one of the problems is that if you leave, your winter rate will be based on your usage when you're gone, and that will unfairly penalize your neighbor who can't afford to leave. So all in all, you'll do far, far better if everybody leaves town. That's the math of it. That's the math. And because people don't understand how this system works, they don't understand that what it means when your entire bill year-round is based only on your usage during the summer. I can see by people shaking their heads, they just don't understand the system. I mean, you know, it's, people are going to get an unpleasant surprise if Measure P doesn't pass.
Okay, thank you, Sue. Matt?
Let's take the concept of paying the same amount per gallon for every single gallon. If you divide the budget for 2016 for the volumetric portion of the system, which is $20 million, by the 4.5 million 100 cubic feet that we use, the rate per CCF would be $4.42. So if we paid the same amount, then when somebody goes away, they wouldn't be paying $4.42. The way that the rate structure is set up is we are only paying in that current period $1.02 of that. We really are only just splitting that $4.44 into two components. The part we are paying immediately and the remaining $3.42 of it in 12 equal payments in the next year. We are paying exactly $4.42 regardless.
Well, neither one of them spoke to gray water, so I'm going to ask that question again and give them another minute to answer it, because I want to know.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, what I like to say is the big problem we have with the cost of water skyrocketing like this, and in particularly, and then focusing on the summer, is that it's much harder for existing homes to retrofit than new subdivisions, than it is for new subdivisions. And so we're going to end up with existing homes actually subsidizing a lot of the indoor water use for the new homes, and that's one of the intrinsic problems with basing this on summer. I mean, it's going to happen anyway, even if we pay a flat amount per gallon, but we're exaggerating that effect because it's always going to be easier for, even at a flat rate, it's going to be a higher percentage paid for of the surface water project and all the other capital expenses if you can have a house that opts out either through their own well or through gray water. Existing houses are going to have a lot of trouble doing it. I talked to a neighbor who tried, and new subdivisions will be able to do it quite easily. So this is an intrinsic problem that's just been really nagging at me.
Matt? And I'll let you address it too, Lucas.
Under traditional rate structures like we had for the last 10 years and what we are in the middle of, we're coming to the very end of it in this 2014, there is no incentive to go to gray water. If you put in a gray water system, you end up with still the same very high fixed costs. In the current rate structure, it's 40%. In CBFR, the fixed fee is only 5%, and that's really for the fire hydrant that's out in front of your house. If somebody came in and did a gray water system, what would happen is their usage that determines their fixed fee for the next year, their estimated taxes using that methodology would reduce, and they would be getting a rebate every single year going forward for implementing a gray water system.
Thank you, Matt. Lucas, because you offered and because you said the city council is going to take this up and people might want to know about what they're going to take up,
Yep.
go for it.
Sure. So we've had a lot of inquiries from people, particularly in the landscape architecture community, and also people who are doing remodels on their homes who are interested in retrofitting their home plumbing to allow for gray water use. So at the next meeting of the City Council on May 13th, we are planning on an item on our consent calendar which would formalize the adoption of Chapter 16 of the State Building Code. It's a new regulation the state has created, which is specific to gray water, and that will also amend the city's actual plumbing code that will allow for much easier use of people, especially if you're trying to retrofit plumbing in your own home, or if you're attempting to try and use gray water in terms of like for watering your plants in your yard and things of that nature. So that will be on the upcoming agenda on May 13th, and I'm not sure if it will end up getting taken off the consent calendar. Thus far, it has a pretty wide support from a lot of folks in the community, including a number of the environmental organizations, Sierra Club and others, and so members of the Sierra Club anyway, and Cool Davis and such. But I think it will be a nice fix that will enable folks very easily to additionally try to retrofit some of their own fixtures to increase the use of gray water, and particularly in conservation, of course, and all matters of conservation is very important, and we, the city, needed to do better a job of that, certainly, but we also want to make it easier for homeowners to do the same.
Okay, thank you, Lucas. So now I know something about gray water in case I want to get some plumbing work done. There is a question, and I looked at the ballot myself to see if there was an explanation, and what they wanted to know is why all the strike-throughs in the voter pamphlet tables, and they're page 43 and 44, and I'm assuming that's because that's what's being removed from the code. But I'll let you two address this. And I turned to the page, you see that they did this. And the person wanted to know why. And I think that's...
What that looks like is a reprint of the Prop 218 notice that everybody who's a ratepayer got back in the early part of last year.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Okay.
All
right.
Okay. Right.
So then I'll give them each, yes?
I'd like to use that as an opportunity. I challenged Sue to tell us why they think that multifamily homes are going to pay 40% more than single-family homes. That's their argument.
No, it's
The
the other way around.
I think it's the other way around.
Okay, I'll be...
Right, the other way around. Single-family are going to pay
wait, I don't
40%
understand.
more.
I don't understand what Matt's doing here.
I'm addressing the Prop 218 notice tables that are on there.
Okay.
Do I
Okay,
get the
they're
floor
saying
then,
no.
or how does this work?
Yeah, I will. I don't, the question was about the strike-throughs. They didn't really ask anything beyond that. So what I'll do is, I'm going to ask the next question, which is a little tougher.
Let me just respond then,
Okay.
if Matt took the opportunity to make a comment. First, I'd like to say, I honestly don't have any idea what Matt's talking about when he says that everyone's paying the same amount per gallon. It's dead wrong, and I'm just continually perplexed. I mean, if there's someone who's, and that answers Matt's question, someone in a median family home is going to be paying 40% more per gallon year-round, okay? Per gallon year-round. That's the way it works. I'm afraid you might not understand your own rate system, Matt, and that's really worrying me. No, I'm serious. Because Doug Dove was worried, and I heard on one of the tapes that the figures you gave him didn't pan out the way they were supposed to. So I'm really worried. For example, if an apartment is vacant in the summer, they will pay much less per gallon for water year-round than an apartment their house or apartment that's occupied in the summer. That's just the way your system works. You might not have thought it through all the way. I'm afraid a lot of people haven't. No, I'm serious.
So now we've got beyond that because we kind of let you two chat about something that wasn't one of the questions. So why don't I give you each 2 minutes and address it as best you can. Explain simply, and the underline simply, how my monthly water rate will be computed. Yeah. So, but I'm still going to give you 2 minutes apiece.
Great.
Maybe I should make it 3. I got enough time to give them each 3, and give them a 1-minute warning, Glenn. Okay. So you get 3 minutes to explain simply, and they underline simply because I'm sure that they're a little confused about all this, how their water rate will be computed. Okay?
Yeah. Okay, well, I'd like to say that, I couldn't do it. I think there's only 2 people in town I've met so far that can do it. It's Bob Dunning and Mark Siegler. I couldn't begin to do it. The leading water expert that we hired and who is used as the last authority on water did it wrong. He thought he understood and did it wrong. And I'm beginning to think maybe Matt doesn't understand it. Honestly, if he thinks that everybody pays the same amount per gallon, it's not clear to me that anyone really understands how it's going to work. I think Mark did go through it. He's an economics professor, and it took him a lot of time, and he didn't understand it until he really sat down, and I mean, it took him, an economics professor who does this for a living, poring over the rate study and poring over the system to finally figure out what was going on with it. And he said, my goodness, I had no idea. So, I mean, initially we thought, well, there's going to be implications with the 12-month period, but it's a huge problem. Council, I don't think understood it when it came to them. I mean, Bob Dunning wrote about talking to a council member that was supposed to explain it to him, and he asked him to calculate it, and he said, I can't. I just can't. I don't know how. I can't. So, I think that's where it is, honestly. And I think, people can do a little creative accounting and talk as if they know, but when you actually get them to calculate it, and you get someone like Mark, who's a professional economist, to go over it, he'll show you how they did it wrong, and that's the way it is.
Thank you, Sue. Matt? Got 3 minutes.
First, you start with the things that you would like from water that you would get that don't go through your meter. You want the peace of mind to be able to look at the fire hydrant that is across the street from you and know that when a truck pulls up because your house is on fire and they are going to pump a whole lot of water out of there, not through any meter, that you in essence have reliability insurance. That is 12.5% of the total cost. Those are what are called the non-volumetric costs. And to calculate your bill, that is going to be $11.38 a month for the comfort of having a fire hydrant that works across from your house. There are some other smaller components, but that's really what it is. The second part is that in your current period, you are going to pay 86 cents a month, a CCF for what you actually use. The example that was on the Prop 218 notice was 11 CCF per month. Let's use the 2016 rates, $1.02. So you would be paying $11 each month for the water you use. The example that they have used for the multifamily, a small apartment uses 167 CCF, so they would be paying 167 CCF for what they use. It's just like pulling up to the pump at the gas station, and everybody, for what they use, pays the exact same amount. But just like a car, how many of you have a car payment? Raise your hand if you've got a car payment. Boy, we don't have very many people with car payments here, but the reality is that the cost of operating a car is the combination of the gasoline you put in it and your monthly payment. Because of the costs associated with the plant, we unfortunately have a 30-year car payment. The way that we decide what the car payment is basically everybody makes that decision when they're standing in the shower in the hottest day of July at 6 o'clock in the morning and saying, I want my water to come out and I want my yard to be irrigated. And what that does is say, this is how much water I need. Well, how much water I need ends up being bricks and mortar cost, and that last portion is the mortgage for everybody choosing how many bricks they use. So you calculate out what your mortgage is, and then like a car payment, you pay it every single month.
Thank you, Matt. Okay, now, I've figured out that I've got about 12 minutes more or less to finish this, to wrap this up. And so what I'm going to do is let each of these people give a last-minute roundup of the things that is the most important to them. And I think it's really important for us to hear that last-minute thing that's important to them. So, Lucas, we're going to start off with you on Measure O. Got 3 minutes.
I'd probably be able to do it.
You can do it in less.
Do it in less.
Good.
I just want to, again, thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum this evening. Appreciate the ability to be here and talk about Measure O and the needs for it. Honestly, again, I think it's essential that we pass Measure O to help fund some of the infrastructure issues that we've been facing, that we've long deferred. The longer that we defer these major road repairs, parks maintenance, and other water conservation type issues, the costlier they become. We have been absolutely laser focused on the issues of economic development. Actually, that's what I'll end with. Is want to give you a little update as to what we've been doing in terms of economic development. So it's not just about, the tax side of the equation. It's also about bringing additional revenue from additional increased economic development. And that's going to take a few years now for us to fully realize some of that income. We've increased engagement with the university, certainly in regional research institutions, to build capacity for a trained workforce and increased entrepreneurship in town. We're promoting existing technology and innovation companies. We have a lot of homegrown companies here like Marone Bioinnovations, FMC, Schilling Robotics, HM Klaus, Arcadia Bioscience, and others. We are currently assisting new companies in locating to Davis. Bioconsortia, Agrinos, Mori Seiki, the Mori Seiki factory is a really good example out here on 2nd Street. There's no question that we need to identify areas for continued growth of existing companies, including potential development of a business park, an innovation park, and an increased densification in the downtown. And then additionally, developing increased investment for startups and research facilities with the university and local entrepreneur organizations. So we've spent some time supporting Davis Roots, which is spinning off a number of innovative, small but growing companies in downtown Davis. And as well as implementation of a makerspace and others, and we will certainly be looking at doing even wet lab incubator space. So the council has been focused not just on the cut side of things and making additional cuts, but also in additional ways in trying to increase our revenue. One other item that I think will be taking a good look at in the future, as well as additional TOT, which is something that it's a transient occupancy tax that is for people that stay at hotels. So if people are staying at our hotels here in Davis, doing a slight increase in that, the citizens have a right to vote on that, certainly. But for people that would be coming into the hotel rooms, there's certainly even an additional little bit of money there that can be increased just having additional hotel nights here in Davis. So we certainly are been laser focused on trying to decrease our expenses, but in this case, we're asking the voters to pass Measure O to help us fund essential infrastructure needs. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Lucas. Jose?
You just heard a list of, a wish list of what they might do or what they would like to do. But the fact is that none of those things are on Measure O. Measure O clearly says for general government purposes. That means they could use it for anything, whether it is pay raises, vacation, Las Vegas, or for doing the potholes, whatever they want. This is like, all of us at some point or another have one child out of the home, and you wonder about how he's doing, and he calls, he says, Dad, I need money for the apartment, or he's at college and he needs money for his meals and other things. But there's a purpose, and you say, well, I need the money, so you go and deposit in the account, and there it goes. You have a different child that he doesn't know what the money he wants is, he just says, Dad, I need $200, and, he runs out of money, and then he calls, he says, I need 50 more, and he doesn't tell you what it is for. There's a point where you will say no. That's the Davis City Council. The Davis City Council has spent money, overspent, they are in the red, and now they say, give us money for anything. They have not justified the voters. I think I might even vote for the measure if there would be something really tangible. But I think there isn't. The measure says for general purposes. So you can't trust this council. You cannot trust them even on making the language of the measure clear. The city attorney can't figure out the difference between a half a cent and a half percent, and between 1% or 1%. But the voters out there, and those of you in the audience, and those of you who would be voting here, they can't figure it out. The city council does not deserve to be rewarded for the mismanagement of money. The city council cannot be trusted. They have not been trusted on spending the money or fixing the potholes with $248 million. What does it make you think with 3.5 they're going to do it? So they cannot be trusted. They cannot be trusted on the language, and they put a misleading language on the ballot so that the voters would say, what's a penny? Let's vote for a penny. And while they will charge them different than what the ballot says. And I believe that the voters of Davis are intelligent enough to see through all this smoke screen and vote no on Measure O.
Thank you, Jose. And now we'll have the pro on Measure P.
I would like to ask a favor, Jean. I've had to go first. I mean, it's standard for pro to go first during a presentation and a rebuttal, but not for every question and a wrap-up. So I feel like Matt's always had the last word. It's put me in an awkward position. And, having to, and I think I'd like a chance to go last this time.
How you feel about that, Matt?
Thank you.
Let Sue go last.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
Go for it, Matt. You've got 3 minutes. I'm going to give you an extra minute because Sue gave me a bad time. Go for it.
Thank you.
Are you serious about that?
We'll see.
This is
Go
the
ahead,
league.
Matt.
You're supposed to be fair, Jean.
I am being fair. Come on, Matt.
Ready, set. The argument that Measure P proponents put out, Sue and Mark Ziegler on Sunday in the Enterprise, starts with the false statement that homeowners and tenants of single-family homes will soon be paying 40% more for each gallon of water than other residential users. The only other users are apartment users. So the numbers say that the difference is 1%. The way that they have gotten to 40% is to compare an 11 CCF per month user to a 167 CCF per month apartment. Well, that's like comparing a mandarin orange to a grapefruit. It's very different. You get a whole lot different juice from the two of them. It's not 40%. If you compare a mandarin orange user on the apartments to a mandarin orange user in the houses, they pay virtually the exact same thing within 2% of each other. Unintended consequences. They have said that we will be increasing the number of shallow wells to be putting more salt into the environment. The reality is that we are going to be taking 20 intermediate aquifer wells off, and we may be replacing them with 3 or 4 at the most, maybe not even then. So going from 20 to 3 is actually environmentally positive, not environmentally negative. The unintended consequences are that it's better for the environment. The third thing is that they have used this word probably, and they have said the users will opt out. Well, a former chair of the school board is over there, and she talked to me in the break and said, the school board has no plans to be opting out of the water system anytime soon. There may be an occasional location where there is an existing well that's close by, but it will be minimal. The cost in El Macero is currently $550,000 a year for the supply charge. To put in our own purple pipe would be $963,000 a year. Are you going to pay $400,000 more, almost double per year, in order to get well water coming out of the ground rather than good water for being able to grow your plants? It's not nice to fool with Mother Nature. The plants want better water. We don't have good water, as those of you who have a water softener know. Finally, there are no solutions being proposed by the opponents the proponents for Measure P, but they have said that a 12-month system would work. Apartments will pay $380,000 a year more under a 12-month system than they are now. The people who rent
Okay.
are the least available to pay more.
Thank you, Matt. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Sue, 4 minutes?
Okay. You know, Matt, you're just plain wrong about the math, and that really worries me because council delegated a lot of the rate construction to you, and you're an amateur, and I think that's really a problem, a huge problem. I would not have said that if you weren't insisting on absolutely wrong numbers. Now, Mark Siegler is a professor of economics, and you totally mischaracterized what he did. Okay, what Matt did was he took the median house, looked at how much water they used, and divided it by the amount of revenue they took in, and found out how much they would be taken in, and found out how much per gallon the median house would be paying. Then he looked at the median apartment building, and he looked at the amount per gallon it was paying, Matt, per gallon. You don't understand what he did. And he took the median large-sized apartment and looked at the amount per gallon, and median of the various commercial users, and looked at the amount per gallon. And what came out of that analysis, Matt, was that single-family homes are paying, the median single-family home is paying 40% per gallon, and when the city opts out, and Village Homes opts out, and maybe El Macero opts out, and maybe, a lot of these other places, because nobody understands these rates that the effect of these rates, then you're going to find that it's going to be even more. But yes, you don't understand your own system, Matt. That was just clear in that answer, and it's very disturbing to me. When Matt was asked how to calculate the rate, I didn't hear him calculate it at all. He talked a little bit about the smaller parts that are easy, but when it came to the bulk of the rate, which is the consumption-based fixed rate, Matt's answer was, quote, "You calculate it the way you would calculate your house mortgage." Now, that makes no sense at all. You don't calculate your house mortgage based on how much you used your house last year. What kind of a comment is that? And Matt totally evaded the question and did not tell you how you calculate your rates. And from the answer he gave about how much per gallon the median house would pay compared to the median apartment, I fully believe after this debate that the person who constructed this rate, who is an amateur, did not understand how to calculate it, and that's why I think we're going to be in for a very unpleasant surprise. I think that the council made an honest mistake that, I don't think they understood it, and I think it's just time to redo it completely, not form another citizens advisory committee. It's just give clear instruction. We want some decent system that will approximate the same amount per gallon. That's what, of use. That's what almost everybody in the city thinks is fair. I've talked to a lot of people, and just do the numbers, do some different rate systems, come up with numbers that actually end up that way. And we never did that. And that's why we have to think it over. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. We've heard last minute, our last roundup of all of the different things that are involved in measures O and P. I urge you to read your ballot, read all of the information that's in it. It's well done, and you should at least be able to figure out, with the advice from the folks here, that are giving us their words of wisdom, what side of these issues you fall on. But I want to say one thing, that the deadline for registering to vote for this election is May the 19th. So if you're not registered to vote, get yourself to the county clerk's office and fill out the forms, and so that you can get one of these ballot pamphlets, and also so you can vote. That's the most important thing that you should do as a citizen. The League of Women Voters works very hard to educate our voters, and that is our sole purpose for having this debate tonight so that you'd have a chance to hear about these various issues from both sides. And I think that all of them did a marvelous job of giving their honest opinions of where all of this falls. I think it's hard with times being tough and with uncertainties for finances for all of us. So we have to think long and hard about these things. And the best thing you can do is read your ballot pamphlet and ask questions. So thank you, and I hope that you will attend another league meeting, which is going to be this coming May the 7th. And we're going to have a candidates night, and so we'll have all of the candidates for city council up here on the dais with Donna Lott moderating, because I will be away on vacation. So please put that on your calendar and make sure that you turn out for that. Appreciate it, and good night.